The first thing he ever said to me wasn't hello, or excuse me, or even my name. It was, "Hey, don't touch that sharp and loud," like I was a stain instead of a person, and yeah, that pretty much set the tone for the night. I was working a late shift at a high-end restaurant in downtown Brookhaven, the kind of place where the chairs cost more than my monthly rent, where the lighting is soft so rich people can pretend they're relaxed. And I was just refilling water glasses when this man, Victor Langston, leaned back in his chair and looked at me like I'd personally offended him by existing. When my hand brushed the edge of the table, his glass tipped water splashing across a few folded linen napkins covered in handwritten symbols, and before I could even apologize, he shoved my wrist away and stood up fast enough that the people nearby turned to watch. "Fantastic," he said, holding up one of the wet napkins like it was evidence. "Do you have any idea what you just ruined?" I didn't answer. I'd learned a long time ago that silence was safer. He smirked, glanced around at the other diners, then looked back at me and said, "This problem has kept my entire research team busy for months. You look smart. Go on. Solve it. If you do, I'll give you everything I own." People laughed. He enjoyed that part. Then he swept his arm across the table on purpose, silverware, clattering glass shattering on the floor, and said real casually, "Clean it up. That's what you're here for." So I knelt down among the broken glass while everyone stared, my face burning, but my brain was doing something else entirely because those symbols on the napkin, they weren't random to me. They were familiar. Too familiar. And while he thought he'd humiliated me, my mind had already locked onto one tiny mistake that unraveled everything he'd written. A few blocks away, the city's convention hall was filling up for the annual Horizon Challenge, a televised competition where wealthy sponsors presented unsolvable logic and systems problems to top academics. Cameras rolling prize money in the tens of millions, and Victor Langston was the star of the show. He had a reputation for never being wrong. Ever. Back at the restaurant, my manager pulled me aside and whispered that I needed to disappear for the rest of the night, that guests like him kept the lights on and one complaint from the wrong person could end me. I nodded because I needed that paycheck. Because my student loans didn't care that I'd dropped out 2 credits short of finishing my doctorate. Because life doesn't pause just because you were once promising. I hadn't planned on going anywhere that night. I was tired, embarrassed, and used to swallowing things I shouldn't have to. But I folded that damp napkin and slid it into my pocket, and the whole walk home my mind kept circling the same thought. He was wrong. Not almost wrong, not debatable wrong, fundamentally wrong. So instead of going home, I changed my route. The convention hall lobby was packed, huge screens broadcasting the live event, people dressed like they belonged there, and me in a plain work uniform that drew looks I'd seen my whole life. On screen, Victor was already on stage, confident, charming, explaining his closed-loop instability model to thunderous applause. Then he said it. "If anyone here can find a flaw in this system," he announced, smiling like he knew the answer already, "I'll personally transfer my entire corporate stake. Every share, everything." The crowd gasped. Social media went wild. My heart started pounding. I pushed toward the entrance to the auditorium and got stopped by security immediately. They laughed when I said I needed to speak to the moderator, told me everyone thought they had the answer, told me to enjoy the show from the lobby. But the moderator noticed the argument. She walked over, curious, not annoyed, and asked what was going on. I pulled the napkins from my pocket and said quietly, "There's a polarity error in his 4th transition state. If you follow it through, the entire system collapses." The room went quiet. Cameras swung toward us. A woman in a service uniform holding a stained napkin was now on every screen in the building. Victor laughed out loud and told security to escort me out, said this was getting ridiculous, but the moderator stopped him because rules are rules, and any formal challenge had to be reviewed. She handed me a marker. My hands were shaking when I stepped up to the board, but the moment I started writing, that feeling disappeared. I explained how the model assumed stability where there was none, how a single reversed assumption flipped the outcome entirely. The academics on stage stopped smirking. One of them pulled out a calculator. Another whispered something I couldn't hear. "She's right," someone said, and suddenly the air changed. Victor's face tightened. He accused me of guessing, of getting lucky, of wasting time, but the moderator confirmed it. The flaw was real. And according to the competition rules, I advanced. That's when Victor leaned into the microphone and said, "Fine. Let's make this interesting. He doubled the stakes, tripled the difficulty demanded. I solve 3 systems problems in under an hour. Live, and added that if I failed, I'd admit on camera that I was a fraud chasing attention. People shifted in their seats. It felt cruel. I accepted anyway. The first problem was probability-based, messy, layered. I recognized the structure immediately and cut through it with a shortcut that made a few people sit up straighter. The second involved spatial logic and abstraction, the kind of thing I'd spent years obsessed with, and I could feel the momentum building. Then, Victor tried to break me another way. He told the audience I'd been removed from my graduate program for misconduct. Said he'd looked into my past. Said I wasn't who I claimed to be. It hit harder than I expected. My hand slipped. My chest tightened. Doubt crept in loud and familiar. But the moderator shut it down. Asked for proof. There was none. And she pointed out that my work spoke for itself. The final problem appeared on the screen, Victor's pride and joy, something he'd claimed no human had ever solved without advanced computation. Halfway through working it, my calculator died. He shrugged and suggested we pause, smiling like he'd just won. "I don't need it," I said, surprising even myself. Minutes ticked down. The pressure was unreal. And then the twist landed. Officials announced that the final problem had been classified internally as unsolvable without machine assistance, that Victor had known this, that it was never meant to be beaten by a person. The room went still. For the first time all night I froze. Maybe I really couldn't do this. Maybe this was where reality caught up. The moderator leaned in and told me no one would blame me for stopping, that I'd already proven enough. I looked out at the crowd, at the people watching from home, at the faces that looked like mine, hopeful and scared at the same time. So I looked back at the board, and I realized something. I wasn't solving one impossible problem. I was connecting 3 simpler ones. Everyone else had been forcing it straight through when it needed to be bent. With seconds left, I rewrote the framework entirely, not calculating the answer, but redefining the system so the answer became inevitable. Silence. Verification followed, then confirmation. Then another. It worked. Victor stood there staring at the board like it had betrayed him. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. He admitted the solution was correct. Admitted he'd been wrong. Months later, my life looked nothing like that night. But I kept that napkin framed on my desk not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Because talent doesn't disappear just because someone decides you don't belong. Now, I want to hear from you. Was Victor justified in pushing so hard, or did he cross a line? Have you ever watched someone get underestimated or been that person yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments, argue it out if you want, and if this story hit you anywhere personal, you already know why.